Welcome back to the Plan Your Federal Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Micah Shalansky, and we got a special roundtable today because we wanted to bring in a lot of great questions that we have been getting really from coast to coast, a little bit international actually as well, about how do all of these changes, everything that we're currently seeing, the unknown and kind of planning, how do we bring these things together? So I asked a couple of other advisors to join me on this one. And the first one is John Raleigh. I've known John for, he'll probably correct me, but over 25 years. So we've had a nice long relationship. And of course, a local on the podcast, Christian Sakamoto, is joining us again to join us. So gentlemen, thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yep.
So as we're kind of going through, one of the things that we were kind of talking about beforehand in our pregame was, let's talk about things that we work with clients with every single day. Because one of the things that we find from our listeners is our listeners really have the same questions our clients do, because we're kind of talking to the same people. We're going through the same things. And so we kind of put together a nice little scatter plot of questions, but it really comes down to a lot of the basics, right? Things that we have to deal with every single day. And so often we can get excited with a TikTok reel, with an Instagram thing about this really cool investment idea, this really cool retirement idea. And it's really this kind of one-off thing that probably doesn't affect you and is probably not good for your retirement. So one of the things that our job is always is, hey, let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to the things that work again and again and again and again to produce a successful retirement. And I often tell my clients, be interested in what you guys say as well, saying, look, your guys' retirement portfolio is not where you should get the excitement in your life for retirement, right? That's not what I'm going for. You should get excitement from travel, from entertainment, from creating memories, all these other things. But we should build kind of a boring retirement plan that just does what it needs to do so you can have the life you'd like to have. But John, what are your thoughts on that?
A great point. When we get things too complicated, it really begins to cause all sorts of problems. And the basics are so important. I haven't had any successful clients I've worked with that haven't had the basics down and down solid. And to me, it really shows that it's a common thread that needs to be there.
Yeah. And the more complicated something is, let's say there's outside reasons that make a situation more complicated, the basics are even more important, right? Because the basics allow us to move into that more complexity that we see as well. But Christian, I kind of like to kick this over to you. What are some of the big questions, concerns, things that are kind of coming up that you're hearing right now that we should be talking about with our listeners?
Yeah, I would say, at least right now, a lot of uncertainty, especially when it comes to the markets. And so I got that a lot just this week, last week, was with all this uncertainty, what do we actually do? Like, what are some of the things that we can actually control? And so I had that conversation to say, well, let's take a look. What are those levers that we can pull, things that we can control? We can take a look at your investments. We can change how we're allocated just between our growth versus how much is not in the market and cash and bonds. We can pull those levers depending on when we want to spend that money. We can take it a step further for non-TSP money or money in an IRA. We could even say, well, how do our investments inside of growth look? Do we sell one particular fund and then buy another? Or do we sell one particular stock or security to buy another just based on the current events? Those are things we can actually control. But then even simpler than that is cash flow, I would say, is going to be a big one as well, right? We can absolutely control what we're spending. Sometimes we have control on the income that we bring on, and we have a little bit of control there, but I'm more focused on where we're spending our money to say, where is it that we could either trim some fat or just work with that client to really understand what their budget is so that it's not just kind of going by the wayside, but we have a little bit more attention to detail on what their spending is, especially as costs keep rising. And then I'd say probably the third thing, not to steal anyone else's thunder, but would be on tax planning as well. And I know we can talk about that later on today.
Yeah, we got to give some listeners some reason to stay to the end of the podcast too, right?
Yeah,
we definitely got to talk about that.
We got to, looking at tax planning, that's another levers that we can pull. And, this year it's going to be interesting to see where the taxes actually go, because it could change and we're still at least unknown where they are now, but that is another area that we can control. But how would you answer that, Micah? We've got some uncertainty. What are some things that we can actually do?
I like that aspect. Let's control the controllables, right? There's a lot of things we can't control, but here's what I think is going to help a lot with uncertainty. Two things. And you're going to see a common theme, by the way, for the rest of these questions in this. Number one, what's our plan? Number two, let's plan for the worst case scenario. And I've been calling this fear setting since the beginning of the year when we started seeing the resignation, the fork, the drip, the Veras, like all these other things that have been coming out. I've been going to clients and be like, hey, let's start planning for the worst case scenario. What are you the most worried about? Micah, I'm worried I'm going to lose my job. There may or may not be a Vera. It may or may not be a discontinued service. I may or not get my benefits. And it's like, okay, great. That's what we need to plan for, right? And so whatever you're worried about, let's sit back. Let's open up the closet when it's making those scary noises and look and realize there's no monster in there. Let's peek under the bed and realize there's no monster under the bed, right? It's the same thing we're going to work with our kids on when they were young. It's the same thing we're going to work on as an adult. The thing we're worried about is what we need a plan for. And then we start working one step at a time. John, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's so true. And Mike, I was even thinking as you were speaking that you can even go further back to saying the real basics, like what are your cash reserves? How much cash reserves do you have? How many months could you handle the craziness going on? I mean, those are so important, and it helps you plan for the worst case scenario, and especially if you have the basics all in place. So we're working to make sure that we can ride through all the ups and downs of the markets and ups and downs of our retirement and ups and downs of our work time. If you don't have the cash reserves in place, if you don't, like Christian said, have an understanding of the spending and know that maybe there is times you need to sort of tighten the belt a little bit because of the circumstances out there, or maybe not. If you're not doing those sort of things, all that does is make the downtime seem worse.
John, I'm going to add to that, right? Cash buys you time, time buys you options, right? And so at the end of the day, so when the market took that big hit, right, I remember I had a client called like, oh my gosh, the market's down so much. Let's put some cash to work. Let's put money to work. And they wanted to put their emergency reserve to work. I was like, whoop, whoop, let's hit the brakes on this. Right? Like, no, Micah, come on. It's going back up. It's a guarantee. I was like, hey, well, nothing is guaranteed with the market, but I hear you, right? Long term, you're probably going to make some money on this, but that doesn't mean we violate our basic rules. And what's our basic rule? Then you have 3 to 6 months of spending. Whatever you're spending, you need 3 to 6 months of that available. I'm gonna make my math easy. If you're spending $10,000 a month, that's 30 to 60,000 bucks. And I love what you're saying about that, because if we break that rule, right? Murphy's Law says something else is going to happen. The transmission's going to go out. The water heater's going to go out. The tree's going to hit the house. Then there's going to be a riff, right? You're going to lose your job. Benefits won't start right away. We got to have that cushion of time. And that kind of goes into that second question that I've been hearing a lot this year is, what if I get laid off? And that goes, John, right back to what you were saying, why cash is so important.
It is, and it's amazing that step gets missed. And it's so easy to get away from it. And I can go buy the car and I'll pay cash for it because I need a new car, or I don't need a new car at that point. And all of a sudden you stop from being disciplined, you stop from being structured and having a great game plan in place to no longer having that.
Boy, I like that, right? I'm a big Jocko fan, extreme ownership. So, discipline equals freedom, and this is one of those discipline things that's there. Now, Christian, I want to kind of come back to our next question on here, but I'm going to skip down to a good one that you had, because I think this ties hand in hand with this cash conversation, which really comes into the aspect that says, how do we create an investment strategy? So I'm going to put you on the spot and says, okay, what's our first rule about investing when we get to making an investment strategy?
Yeah, that's going to be the money that we plan to spend in the next 5 years that we don't want in the stock market, right? And we say that, we reiterate that, but it's true. And we go back to the why, and we hold up our hand and say 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. We say that's 5 years that it took the market to recover. And so therefore, we probably want to make sure we have at least 5 years outside of the market to weather the next storm that'll come, the next downturn that'll be there. And so that guides and dictates how much that we want to have in our investment strategy and what to consider for it. And we talked about this recently as well. That's going to be a combination of whatever your pension income will be, or maybe any additional wages that you might have. Really, what are all the sources of fixed income that'll be coming in while you're still working, or while you're transitioning to retirement, or if you get laid off, or all the, whatever it is, identify all those fixed expenses. Maybe you're married and your spouse continues to work, or there'll be some Social Security aspect there, right? Figure out what all that is, and then anything left over, that gap between what your top number is a month with what that fixed income is, that gap, we need to now make sure we have 5 years worth set aside out of the market. And then therefore, the rest of the money, we can consider putting it in growth so that when the market does eventually recover, there's enough there that we didn't just spend because we kept it all in cash. So we have to consider your retirement income timeline to know what's our investment strategy.
It's so key, right? You know, you guys know this, our 5-step process of success working with a client is we go through estate planning, risk management, retirement income, then investments, then taxes. And we're very intentional behind this, Christian, for what you're just saying, is we got to have that retirement income plan first. So many people mix this up. So many financial advisors mix this up, is they get so focused on the money, they want to jump into the investments. The investments are just a tool, right? So my wife wants to build this giant deck in the backyard this summer. So if we go to build that deck and I just go to my toolbox and I bring out all the tools and I dump out all my tools in the backyard, right? And I'm like, all right, I got all these tools that are out there. Well, hold on a second. That's not a really good plan for building a deck, right? I need a little bit more of a plan. What tools do I actually need on the shop? I don't need everything in my garage to come out to build a deck. But we do that same thought when it comes to investments. So other advisors, especially, they'll say, hey, all I want to focus on is the investments. They pull out all the tools from the tool chest, but they don't know where you're going. We got to solve for something, right? And what we're solving for, Christian, is that gap. So if what I heard you say, if a client spending $10,000 a month and between, let's say, their pension and income's coming in is $4,000 a month, that gap is $6,000. So we need that $6,000 a month protected for the next 5 years, plus taxes on top of that, don't we? Right. So we need a healthy portion of money outside of the market. Now, when you say outside of the market, what does that mean, John? What does outside of the stock market mean?
Something that doesn't have principal risk, something that is not, that we know is going to be there. There's all different avenues to do it, but it really is where you're not concentrating on the return, even though the return is important of that money, but you're making sure that the money is going to be there for when you need it.
What does it mean to buy back your military time? Can it really boost your federal pension? It might, but there's some key details that you need to understand. Our ultimate guide to buying back military time is going to break down the key questions like how much will it cost? How much will increase your pension? What effect is it going to have on your military benefits? Do you lose your disability VA pay or not? These are key things you need to know before you make this decision to buy back your military time. In order to get this guide, visit planyourfederalretirement.com/BBMT. That's planyourfederalretirement.com/Bravo Mike Tango. Get the answers you need to make the most out of your federal benefits. Download this guide today and start planning with confidence. Until next time, happy planning.
I love it. Its primary job is to be there, right? Its secondary job is to grow a little bit. That's nice. Like, I'll take all that extra growth we can get, but not at the expense of not being there in the future. So there's several different tools that you can use for that, but looking at it with that approach. And then I think that really goes back to kind of this other question, John, that we get so often from clients is saying, hey, am I on track for retirement? Right? So when someone comes and asks that, what are some of the things that you like to go through with them? You know, there's so many details like, am I on track for retirement? It's like, how do you boil this down? But just for talking points, what are the key things that you're going to be looking at?
Well, first of all, making sure you know what you're needing for retirement. I mean, the basic is how much money is going to need to come out of the investments to be able to maintain this lifestyle you live. And that's a tricky one because a lot of people will say, oh, I won't need as much money as I'm making right now. And basically what that does is put you in a situation, okay, so you're going to settle for less than what you're dealing with right now. I mean, so there's a lot of factors there to sit there and say, okay, how much income do I need? Then you look at it, and when you're talking about giving and investing money on a time frame situation, is there enough money that's going to be subject to market exposure to give us the opportunity to replace the money that's being spent in year 1 through 5, and then year 6 through 10, and in that time frame? So, to me, it's first of all saying how much money's there, or how much money do you need, and then is the pool of money that you've done save so far, if you're not retired, big enough to maintain that, or how much you need to save to get there? Or if you're retired, is that pool big enough and can we make this work? with the sources of income you have.
I like it. And I think there's a misconception out there. I was trying to look to see who came up with this, and I don't know, but it was the aspect that says, hey, you need 80% of your current income into retirement. Or if your house is paid off, you need 60%. And I think that's bogus. You need, John, 100% what you said, 100% of what you're spending today. Unless like the house is going to get paid off next year. Okay, then we could kind of talk about that. Short of that, we need to plan for 100% of whatever you're spending now. How do we replace that? And your investment, your pension is fantastic, right? Your first pension you have coming in, Social Security is fantastic, but they both have a common flaw with them. And this is something that's going to bite you in the butt if you don't follow the strategy correct. And that's inflation. Neither one of those are designed to outpace inflation. And we've seen that in the last several years, right? And we get to see this working with retirees that they're coming in like, hey, this money's not going as far as it used to go. What are we going to do? If the investment plan was set up correct, the investments are what has to outpace inflation. So I know, Christian, one of the comments is people are asked like, what changes should I make inside of my TSP? And this kind of goes back to the investment plan. I had a new client contact us the other day, and he has about most of his money in the L2025 fund because he's going to retire this year. And from his perspective, right, it made tons of sense. It's like, hey, I'm going to retire in 2025. So I'm putting 100% of my money in the L2025 fund, which is the lifecycle fund for retiring in 2025. That's a great thought, but the application doesn't quite work out. So Christian, I'm going to pick on you. Like, what's the concern we would have with that if somebody's going into retirement?
Yeah, great question. So I just looked it up. When we look on the TSP website for the allocations in the L2025 fund, I'm in around 66% is in the G fund, a little like 5.5% in the F fund. Okay, so right there, 70% of that L2025 fund is not invested. It's in cash and bonds. So that would mean alternatively, there's only about 30% that's still in the market. So the question would be for somebody who's just now retiring and they've got 20, 30 plus years to live in retirement, do we want this TSP? Is there going to be probably a huge chunk of their net worth and investable assets in retirement? Do we want 70% out of the market at retirement? The answer could be perhaps, yeah, maybe, right? Maybe if we go through their investment goals and income goals and they don't actually need their TSP distributions to live on and they're going to be just fine with the pension and Social Security, perhaps that might be for them that would work. But for a lot of people, that L2025 fund would just be too conservative. And that's kind of the problem with the life cycle funds is we see them get a little bit too conservative, a little too quickly. And so if you're not careful, you might find yourself just thinking, oh, I'm retiring in 2025, so that's where I'm going to put my money, without realizing, well, shoot, that probably isn't the right allocation for most people.
Oh, it's 100% correct, right? And then the other thing with the L2025 fund, Christian, which I know you know, is that at the end of this year, it turns into the L income fund, right? And the L income fund is a little deceiving, in my opinion, is its name, right? It's not so much designed to draw income, but now you went from, I'm going to get this wrong, but 70% to probably 75 or 80% inside of the GNF. And so this goes back to, Christian, that 5-year rule you were talking about, right? If it's money we need to spend in the next 5 years, boy, let's make it protected. And the G fund would probably be a great place for it. Now, we got a problem, unfortunately, with the TSP because of their proportionate distribution rules and how we can pull money out. I know we've talked about this on previous podcasts, so it's not a great one-fit solution, but sometimes I like with clients, actually most of the time with clients, I really love as they get close to retirement to customize their L fund. Let's create your own L fund. Let's create the Bob L fund. Let's create the Sue L fund, right? Let's look at what you're spending, what you're going to do. And there's only 5 funds. And now let's build your own L fund. Now, if you're younger in the timeline and we're just putting money in the TSP, man, I love the L funds, right? Stick it in there, forget about it, just fund that bad boy, let it work. As we get closer to retirement, the L funds tend to get a bit too conservative too quickly, which runs into the retirement nemesis, inflation, right? How are we going to outpace inflation? And the G fund's just not going to do it. That doesn't mean the G fund's bad. The G fund's fantastic for a money market return, but it's not an inflationary return. Sorry, I geek out on this stuff, probably a little too excited. All right, John, let's go ahead and make sure we're actually talking a little bit about taxes, though. So I'm going to kind of kick a little 2 questions over to you, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. A couple big things that end up biting clients in the rear when we have it planned for it. RMDs, right? Required minimum distributions between 73 and 75, number one. Number two is going to be not good tax planning. And that's how RMDs kind of bias as well. So what are some of the things you're hearing from clients on this, and how do we address those?
It's so interesting because the people that get bit by the taxable situation are normally people that have put off not paying attention to it, or they just spent their whole life saying, what is the minimum amount of taxes that I can pay right now? Because when you hit required minimum distributions, all of a sudden you have no control and a new source of income is hitting. It's going to be taxable to you. It's going to push you up into tax brackets you've been trying to avoid, and you can't stop it. So it makes it really difficult not to pay attention. And I know this is my opinion, but the tax codes seem to be designed to hurt the people that are procrastinators the most. If you're proactive in your thinking, you have a better chance. It's no different than if you're playing a board game, or if you remember when you were a kid or whatever, and you read the directions first. It's so much easier to win the game if you know what the rules are than if they're not. And I'm not saying to read the tax codes, but be aware of them.
We do.
And make sure that you use the ones to your advantage. I know, Micah, you're...
You could say it. I'm a tax geek. That's fine. I'm weird. I am that guy that actually reads the tax code. Fair enough. But John, I'm going to pull on that thread a little bit, because I love the way that you said that, which the tax code penalizes procrastinators. That's true, right? Because we want to save the most money today. We dump it in the TSP, all pre-tax. We think is a tax deduction. You didn't get a tax deduction. You got a loan from the IRS. But the problem is you don't get to set the interest rate that loan is at. That'll be wherever you draw that money back is how much you got to pay. So we really got to balance this out in tax planning. So Christian, I know you're big into the 10-year timeline and tax projections, the Roth conversion strategies. How do you blend that when you're working? Let's go with a pre-retiree. And then how does that change with the retiree as well?
Well, we have to consider, we're going to play in the rules or the sandbox that we have today. We have to understand that we can't predict where taxes will be 10 years from now. But if we just ask the question, where do we think taxes will be in the future? If we just had to guess, like if we had to guess, do we think taxes are going to go up or down in the future? A lot of times the response I get is, I do think taxes will be going up in the future. And for a while, over the last, 7 years, that was a fact, that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that began 2018 through 2025 lowered the tax rate, and therefore starting in 2026, the taxes were going to go up. So as we're recording this, we still don't know what the new tax proposals might be, but what we want to do to help answer that question is just say, okay, where do we think the tax laws might be? But then we also want to go back to spending and cash flow. If we go back to John's point, do we think we're going to be spending 80 or 60% of what we're making when we retire? And we say no to that. Well, then good chance your tax bracket is going to be very similar to what it is now. And so we can try to mimic what your tax bracket is today of what it will be in retirement. And that's true when I'm talking to someone who's pre-retired. If they're retired, we have a little bit more history to kind of prove that point. But then there's going to be different levers that get pulled as well. One of them being Social Security, which increases the tax rate. And then number two, if we did nothing, what the RMD values would be as well.
Christian, when you said, I'm going to ask a question quick. You said Social Security increases your tax rate. Like how? How does turning on Social Security increase your tax rate?
Yeah, so Social Security actually is part of your taxable income up to 85%. And 85% of Social Security is taxed. And for some, it's less than that, depending on what their income is.
So we got that extra income that's kicking on. And so that's what's kicking up our taxes higher and higher. Then that goes right into those RMDs too, right?
Right. And we can kind of mathematically project, okay, well, we think based on your IRA and TSP balance, what it is today, that 10 years from now, when you hit RMD age, that with the investment growth, and what we think it'll be, that we can predict how much that RMD is just doing that math today. And is it going to be perfect? No. But for some people, it's a shocking number, right? If we looked at $1 million TSP and we forecast 10 years from now, it's maybe 2 million. Okay. Well, that might be a $80,000 RMD that they might have to take out, and that could really just, if we weren't intentional about it, it could really blow up their tax plan. So we have to
Medicare. Yeah. Your IRMA rates as well, right?
Yeah, that too.
Your Medicare premium. Mm-hmm.
So probably a long-winded answer there, but there's lots of things to consider as we're thinking about, again, the tax laws that we're in and kind of playing in those rules, but also being aware that they might change, they could go up. So we might want to take advantage of the years for which the taxes might be lower.
Yeah, I like what you said there, right? Which is plan for the laws we know today. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that. Well, I don't know I don't know what inflation is going to be. I don't know what the future is going to be. I don't know what taxes are going to be. I don't know what holdings are going to be. You're correct. None of us know, right? But now 10 years is going to happen, whether you like it or not. The time still moves on. So the question is, what do we know today? What are those, going back to the top of the podcast, right? What are those controllable things that we can do? And then you start implementing a plan. And is the plan you're doing today the exact same plan you're going to be doing at retirement? Well, it depends how far that is, right? 15 years down the road? The answer is no, because the rules are going to change, John, to kind of what you were saying, right? It's nice to know what the rules are before we play with the game. Congress is going to change the rules. That's not an excuse not to do a plan. All of the clients we've worked with that do plans, that follow them and then tweak them as they go on, are head and shoulders above the people that come to us and is like, well, really haven't done any planning and here's what I have, right? They're not the same situations. So let's pull this down into I could talk about this all day, but let's pull this into some action items for our listeners, right? I think really a key source here is going to be, what's your plan? Don't overcomplicate this, right? But do you know the basics? Do you know what your cash flow is going to be really, really important. So I'm going to say that's the number one thing, is knowing your cash flow. How much do you spend, right? Do we have that emergency reserve? John, what would you say is another action item our listeners can do?
Well, if it's okay, I'll just add one other thing. Not only know what your reserves are, but if you have trouble tracking your expenses and you're working, use your income then as the expenses going out and use that to make it simple. And that's a great action item to do. And I think anybody that hasn't done it, I mean, you're making a mistake, because like I said, I don't know, you all can answer it. I have not had a successful client that wasn't strong in their cash reserves and that piece of their planning process. Then, of course, the next step is, if you're retired, what is your living right now? And how are your investments set up associated with the money you need coming out? So where is it? If you're retired, what's that number? If you're thinking about retirement, what do you think that number is going to be? So that you can plan to put the pieces in place so that when retirement comes, you're able to handle that particular process.
I like it. Christian, another action item our listeners can be thinking about this week.
Well, speaking of taxes, I would say develop a tax plan and a tax projection for this current tax year. That might sound a little bit scarier than what it actually is. The first place to start is go back to last year's tax return. Just take a look at that 1040. Look at what your wages were. Maybe you're retired, so your pension, maybe Social Security income. Figure out what your taxable income was. And then think about this year. What changes happened last year to this year that might affect this number? Did I get a bonus, or am I getting a raise? Am I stopping work and I'm now retiring? Develop that tax plan and tax projection for this year would be my recommendation. If you get a little bit concerned on how to do that, you can contact us, because we do that all day long. But that would be my action item.
I like it. A simple way to do that too, if you're a big do-it-yourselfer and you really like doing your own taxes on TurboTax, after you get your taxes done, go back into it. Christian, do what you said. Adjust it for where your income is going to be this year. And you're going to get pretty close until they change the law. Then that's going to be a different story. But until that time, right, you're going to get pretty close on what that's going to be. Awesome. Gentlemen, I've had a lot of fun. I think this has been a lot of value to our listeners. Biggest thing, of course, with our listeners is take action. One of the things we'd love you guys to do is we want to help another 1 million federal employees with retirement. Can't do that without your help. So make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you share this, send this podcast out message to other federal employees. We want you to have the right information when you get ready to retire. Thank you guys again. Until next time, happy planning.